right, all right. Well, welcome to X Communications. I'm Broderick Thomas, and I'm super excited today to have with me essentially my best friend, my business partner. You know, we've done so many different things together, and I learned so much from this man. So I won't take too long. I'll jump right into introducing who he is. But his name is George Mundin, and I'm excited to have you here today, Deacon. First of all, let me clarify for anybody listening. We refer to each other as deacon and pastor. So you'll hear him call me pastor. You'll hear me call him deacon. For years, we both are men of God. We're followers of Christ, and we talk about the Bible a lot. We talk about our spirituality. Forgive us if you hear us calling each other by our affectionate nicknames, if you will. But that's just kind of how we go. But Deacon, how you doing today, man?
I am doing fantastic, Pastor. I appreciate you. Everything is beautiful. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good, man. I had to have you because, as I've started this process with, being a podcast host, which is something that you kind of put me up to. You were one of those people that influenced my decision to do this. It only made sense to be able to take some time and you and I have some conversations because we do it so often. Like we talk almost every day. And even though we talk that frequently, when we do talk, it's never really a short conversation because we got so many things to be able to cover. So yeah, it was almost a natural thing for you to be in the very beginning stages of me doing this podcast. So I know that your input on business ideas and business concepts is very valuable. And also, you and I are partners in cryptocurrency. So generally, I'm always kind of diverting to him for information and his ideas on some things. So speaking of crypto, man, let's jump into that because that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today.
Okay.
We have a history in that. I want to say that was 2017, maybe, when we jumped in.
2017.
2017
yes, and July, I believe.
Yeah, man, and Bitcoin was maybe $2,400 at that time.
I think it was just $2,400. Yep, just over
right around there. Yes. And it was funny because I was starting to learn about it. I took a whole, me, I like to go into the lab. So I took a whole weekend and started studying what Bitcoin was. I had never heard of before. So before I did anything, I just went in, and when I came out, mind blown, literally, right? And so being my best friend, you were one of my first phone calls. So I kept telling you, hey, George, I got something I got to show you, man. You said, okay. But being busy, we didn't really get to catch up. And one day I told you, hey, look, I need to see you. And it's very rare that I tell you that I honestly just need something, and you knew it was serious. And I came and showed that to you, man. And since then, we've been off to the races. We've done so much in this space. But, give me real quick, just kind of what your thoughts on where you are in crypto right now, what it means to you, what you see going forward. Just tell me a little bit about where you are with that.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Well, first and foremost, I want to go back to your first statement. I want to say thank you because that adamant push, if you would, that you gave, like, hey, I'm going to be over today. I need 30 minutes. Can I swing by? And I'm like, absolutely. And that was in life, you look back at defining moments. That was a defining moment because, first of all, I appreciate the fact that you were willing to receive that information from someone else, do your due diligence on it, and then think enough to share that information with me because life has changed tremendously since then because of that interaction. And so thank you. So with that being said, where we are in crypto now, well, we're about 3.5 years out now from that point. And, after investing in tremendous study and education and investment in education, I believe we're at a critical point. I mean, just in history in itself, on a financial aspect, because in my belief, in my understanding, this is a brand new asset class, right? And for some people, it's just a way to make extra money. They've invested in it and they just see it as a, maybe a fast growing asset that, they can put some money in and make some money. But for others that really have studied the space, things are changing. This is, to my belief, Bitcoin in itself and crypto is a financial revolution, and we're at a point where we're seeing the internet of money. And my belief is going to be even bigger than the internet itself because we're dealing with finances. So very excited about the future. I still believe we're in the very early stages of it. a lot of development, a lot of things that need to be in place regulatory wise and others. But we're at a really good point in time where I think people are opening up and understanding that things are changing. And if you don't change, you're going to get left. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things we talked about, and I remember you sent me, either you or Kareem sent me a video probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it really did take my thinking that much higher in regards to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But the guy was talking about, what money really is. And I think most of us are so obsessed with obtaining money that we don't realize that money in and of itself is nothing. I mean, it's just, and the guy was saying, like, nobody really wants money. Like, nobody really wants to walk around with these green little pieces of paper, and nobody really wants Bitcoin, and nobody really wants gold bars. But what they do want is the ability to be able to exchange that for something else that they want, right? And so in that, we are starting to see Bitcoin become a tremendous store of value. And one of the things that he talked about that really kind of blew my mind was how Bitcoin itself, and I guess it will apply to most cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin itself is the one currency that, regardless of the supply and demand, so in most currencies, if you have a greater demand, then they increase the supply. So if the price of gold went up, then they go and dig in the ground and get more gold, right? With money, if we need more money, we need more dollars, they print more dollars when that demand goes up. With Bitcoin, it is the only currency, or the first currency, I should say, that regardless of the demand, the supply will never change. And what his statement was, that is what will allow Bitcoin to carry its store of value for a longer period of time in history than most currencies that have come before it. So that was a game changer in looking at that, because when we look at cryptocurrency being a new form of storing value, not necessarily the money itself, but just storing value, then we enter into a whole new paradigm of how we think about assets, you know what I mean? And things that we want and how we do business in our life. Right?
Yep, absolutely. 100%. And that was very powerful. That was a powerful understanding for me as well. Like you said, and the gentleman who did that, his name was Michael Saylor. He owns a company called MicroStrategies, and he was kind of the guy that spearheaded on a corporate level the fact that it was a good idea, being that the dollar right now at this point is being driven into the ground by the printing press in Washington, and it's losing value, which means the average person holding on the dollars, in their personal belief that they're holding on to wealth, they're losing wealth every second, really, because their dollars are losing buying power, which is, how inflation really works. And so his understanding was that, okay, Bitcoin, in what it is, like you mentioned, being only the fact that it's going to be 21 million ever minted, ever. So there's a defined amount. It's the greatest asset in the history of mankind ever, far greater than gold. And so for that reason, it only makes sense, if you want to preserve your wealth, you need to own Bitcoin. And that's an education piece. And I think, the masses of people probably won't get it in time, because there's only going to be but so much Bitcoin. So now's the time. I mean, really, it's just because we weren't taught true financial education, we were devoid of that. So people don't really understand what money is. They think that dollars money. And so money can be anything. It really can. It's what is accepted, right? And gold has always had value for 5,000 plus years, and it'll still have value, but there's going to be a changing of the guard. Bitcoin is going to be the new reserve. It's going to be the new way of storing wealth. It's immutable, it's divisible, portable, storable. It's a supreme way of holding wealth. I mean, it's the best thing we've ever seen.
And I want to go back to what you said about the dollar, because you and I have been talking about this for probably almost 2 years now, as we've watched things in our economy and how things are happening in this country in particular. And I remember, last year, this time when the pandemic was just kicking in, and Congress was quickly passing the first stimulus package, putting out trillions and trillions of dollars. I think that first one was right around $8 or $9 trillion when it came out. And what amazed me, because I remember calling you saying, wait a minute, I thought we just said we were $24 trillion in debt. Where y'all get that money from? You know what I'm saying? That's like your kid leaving home, ain't got no money in his pocket, said, Mom and Daddy, I'm broke, I need some money for X, Y, Z. But then they come home, they'd have been to Foot Locker, they'd have been to the toy store, as a parent, you gonna ask the question, you gonna raise your hand and ask the question, where you get that from? You know
Where's
what I'm
that
saying?
money coming from?
You said earlier you ain't had no money. Where that money coming from? And so to that end, we joke about it, but I mean, the average American should be concerned about that and should be asking questions because, as you stated, we're just printing money at endless quantities. Um, and as you do that, the buying power loses its value. It continues to, I believe, contribute to an inflation that will be the likes of something we haven't seen in our lifetimes. I'll put it that way. Um, and so, with that being said, I just think that's some information that should be out there. People should be concerned about, our government just being so quick to push out more money into the system. Yeah, I know everybody's looking for a stimulus check, and I get it. People need it. There are people out there who are, losing jobs, losing homes, losing businesses. I truly understand that. But at what cost? What is that going to look like 6 or 12 months from now? You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. And that's the biggest piece, because again, it goes back to the education. People haven't been educated on what money really is. And so without devoid of that education, most people's information is coming from the television screen or, from a video on their phone, and it's being given to them by someone who is being told what to say. And that information that they're getting is devoid of the education. And because of that, people have to take the time to educate themselves and find out what money is, because again, we're losing our wealth every day. So if you think about it, people are going out to work every day, 8 hours, 10 hours a day, performing a task with a trade-off of hours for dollars. They're getting those dollars for those hours given. Your time is your greatest resource. Can't get that back. Yep. And now you're getting a trade-off of a diminishing return, right? Because what you're getting a trade-off for, you're giving hours that you can't get back for a dollar. Let's use that as a fiat currency that's losing value every second because the controllers of that dollar are printing it into infinity. And whenever there's more supply greater than demand, the value of it is lowered, Absolutely. And that's where we're at right now. So 6 months from now, Americans' wealth is going to be less than what it is now if all of your wealth is in fiat currency, US dollar.
Absolutely. I remember seeing a guy, I want to say that was Ray Dalio, but I could be wrong. Don't hold me to that.
Okay.
He was talking about how when our governments print more money, that's not creating more wealth. In fact, it's exactly the opposite, because the wealth is a constant. And so when you print more money, that new money has to get its value from someplace. And so it's generally taking its value from existing money or existing currency in order to support the new currency, which weakens what was already there, right? And so printing more money is not creating more wealth or even creating more currency or value for currency in that regard. It's actually weakening currency that already exists, which at some point, when you do it in such large portions, there's going to be a penalty for that. We're gonna have to pay for that. You know what I mean? And so that's one of my fears, but also my driving forces is to be prepared for that. You know what I mean? We have conversations all the time that, if the bottom drops out, if the US dollar is no longer the global reserve currency, and I don't know how much most people know what that would mean for us. Matter of fact, let me touch on that. I want to say what that means. So if the United States dollar loses its position as the global reserve currency, what that means is that every country that we currently hold at bay for our debt is going to come knocking. You know what I mean? And so the reason we can carry so many trillions of dollars of debt globally is because we are the global reserve currency. So you have third world countries that will literally trade their goods and services so that they can get US dollars to pay for other things that they need, like oil, which is hence why we have what's called the petrodollar. So we jumping into some stuff right there. But anyway, what that would mean that if all of a sudden we lose that status, the people that don't come knocking for their debts simply because our dollar is the global reserve currency will no longer be held at bay for that. And so when our inflation starts to kick in and when people come knocking to call on their debts, our economy is going to look like something we've never seen before, right? Did I miss anything on that?
No, absolutely. You nailed it. I mean, that's exactly it. And see, the thing is, if people study history, this has happened before. This has happened. This is not the first time. It's just that we Americans, we don't know that. And there's people here. I have friends that grew up in communist countries where they've seen their dollars go to nothing. A wheelbarrow of money needed to buy a loaf of bread. I mean, really, like it was that bad. People standing in long lines to get a potato for an entire family for a day. They've lived through that. Their grandparents have lived through that. We've seen tough times, but we've not seen that. And a lot of people don't understand when your dollar, your currency is devalued basically down to nothing, then all you have is paper, right? And that's it. And that's really what most people are carrying. They don't understand that the dollars that they deem so highly, right, that is just monopoly money. There's nothing backing it up. There's no gold in Fort Knox.
Right.
It's a joke, right? We're in major debt to China and other countries. So we don't have any money. We're basically broke. And off the backs of the people, i.e. the service, I call them, the extraction of the money police, right? To get your money for the purposes of paying down the debt of the United States is what we've been told in the Department of Treasury. But the reality of it is your money is not going to debt. The debt will never end, because how can it end when you're continuing to print the paper?
Right? Absolutely. So
that's a challenge. And like you said, the rest of the world is looking at us because our dollar's dropping.
it's so funny that most people won't literally look at it, but when you look at a dollar bill somewhere on there, and help me out with this, it says it's a note of debt. Is that right?
It's a note that is a Federal Reserve note. And most people don't know that because they think the Federal Reserve is a part of the United States government. But the Federal Reserve is a privately owned entity that was started in 1911, 1913, Woodrow Wilson and the bankers. And because ever since that point in time, we've become a slave state in debt to a private banking corporation by globalist bankers. And that's where we're at right now. So
yeah.
They don't have any bosses. They just got printing presses.
Absolutely.
And a whole lot of cattle.
Absolutely. Because I think that was the Rothschild dude that said, I don't need to control the government or the politicians. I need to control the money of the country. And when you control the money of the country, everything else just falls servant to you. You know
Absolutely,
what I mean?
Man.
And we're not the only country with a Federal Reserve. Globally, we have central banks, central banking.
Right.
Ours is just called the Federal Reserve. But these people or these entities are set up around the planet, and they are literally ruling the world at this point. So anyway, man, we when we start talking about this, well, we could dive off into so many different things. But I did want to get back on to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency because I wanted to have the opportunity to share a little bit more about this for people that may not know about it. I think it's so important for people to get information and understanding about what it is so that they can, do research and make their own decisions. You don't have to take my word for it, your word for it, but at least know that there's something out there and somebody said to you, maybe you should check this out a little bit more. So I wanted to be able to get that information out there because, again, you and I have been through this for a few years now. We've seen a lot of different stuff, particularly that day we were standing out there at the ATM. Dude, it was so crazy. I think I was downtown at work and I had, I want to say that was about $3,000. And we were going to we were buying some tokens in this company that we were dealing with, and to put the money in the account. So the quickest way to do that was through a Bitcoin ATM, which they have. Those things exist, and we knew where they were. We get to the ATM, man, and from the 15-minute drive from my job to this ATM, Bitcoin tanked. It took a dive. And in that dive, the $3,000 in Bitcoin we had at that moment when we left was only worth about $1,200, $1,400 by the time we got to the ATM. So we were sitting there stuck with it. But I bring that up because I remember you told me something. I want you to talk about this. You said that you didn't know then what you know now, because otherwise you'd have seen that coming. Tell me what that was.
Okay.
Tell me what you've since added to that if that were to happen now, we can see that coming and know a little bit better, not to be sitting around and lost half our money.
Man, I'll tell you, that was a heartbreaking day right there. I'll never forget it.
Man.
Coming out of that convenience store where the ATM machine was and trying to transfer money that wasn't there, Bitcoin, you would, because the value had dropped. And, that's where people are right now. We were, speculative investors, if you want to call us that at the time, with no education, right? This was a new space. We just had seen Bitcoin go from $2,200 to $20,000. We had witnessed that whole thing. So in our uneducated view, as many people are right now, this is never going to end. The sky's the limit. Let's keep dumping money in. And so, but at that point, I didn't know how to read charts, or they call it technical analysis, TA. And so it was just, Bitcoin was just this investment, just throw money in it, kind of like the stock market. But behind the scenes, what I understand now is that there's, and excuse me if you're a listener on this, this is not a reference to you, but this is how it's deemed in the technical analysis world. You've got smart money and dumb money, right? And smart money will always take the money from dumb money. Patient hands will always receive money from impatient hands. And that's through education. And so I couldn't see the technical analysis, and all the indicators, if you would, was showing that Bitcoin was about to drop, but we couldn't see that. So once that happened, I committed the next 2 years to investing in education and training by some of the best traders and technical analysis experts in the field, to learn how to read the charts, because I made it my duty that would never happen again to me. So
absolutely, very
grateful.
That's one of those things we have in common. Once you get us one time, we make sure that that's never going to happen again.
Absolutely.
You know? So, and I'm glad that you did that, because now over those 2 years, you've talked to me consistently about being able to understand the technical analysis, how to read the charts. I would just call you and say, hey, what does the chart say? But since then, I've learned how to actually read charts now myself, understand technical analysis. And you were so right. It was probably one of a single piece of education that has had more value to me than almost anything else in my lifetime. So now we can do a little bit better. We're both actively trading in crypto, the altcoins versus Bitcoin, watching Bitcoin dominance and all those kinds of things. I'm trying to impress you right now, Deacon. You know how that is.
Doing good. I love it. This used to be a one-sided conversation.
It used to be.
We can talk. Yeah.
It used to be. If somebody asked me what was going on with Bitcoin, hang on a second, let me make a phone call. You know. So anyway, so tell me right now. Just I know you and I talk all the time about things that we're investing in and some moves that we're making. And just the other day we had a conversation about this. But tell me right now, what is one of your favorite, or name a couple, but some of your favorite coins that are not Bitcoin for people that aren't keeping up with that?
Okay. Do you mind if I reference Bitcoin for a second and just
absolutely
give people a reference point? Okay. So just for a reference point, if you're new to crypto, or you've only maybe heard of Bitcoin and not familiar with altcoins, Bitcoin is the grandfather, I would call it that, the king of the crypto coins. It was the first, the original. It was launched in 2009 by a gentleman. Speculatively, his name was Satoshi Nakamoto. He was supposedly the individual that created Bitcoin, the white paper, which was the design and the layout and the roadmap of the purpose of Bitcoin, what it was designed to do, and the purpose of it at the time. And Bitcoin's original purpose was, it happened during the crash of 2008, the housing market crash. And the problem behind it was that it was the bankers that had basically initiated the challenges that we ran into with the housing market. And his goal was to design a peer-to-peer network where we did not need banking institutions or a central entity in between two people wanting to do a transaction. And so this was designed to be a way of moving value between two individuals in seconds, basically, from wallet to wallet. And Bitcoin was that creation. Since then, it's gone on to be the greatest asset in the history of the world, as far as the way it's increased in value over the past 10 years. Is the greatest performing asset ever in that window of time. But since Bitcoin's inception, there's been other coins that have been created. And they're called altcoins, alternative coins. So we're going to talk about some of those, and your question to answer that, some of my favorites. So I have a few, a lot actually, but we'll stick to some of my top favorites. And one of them is Ethereum. Is one of my favorites. It's the second largest altcoin as far as market cap and overall capital outside of Bitcoin. And it's been around about 6 years, since like 2013, somewhere around that time frame. And it's a platform that you can build other cryptos on it. And there's a lot of new emerging industries. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. But Ethereum is one of my favorites. Also, Chainlink. Definitely one of my favorites. And Chainlink's a big one. That's a good one. A lot of people.
That's one of my favorites too.
You like Chainlink, right?
You know I like Chainlink.
Yeah, we went heavy on Chainlink. So Chainlink's a good one. Chainlink is what you will call the oracle, and oracles are designed to kind of be a medium in between, two different, spaces, if you would. And if to give you a reference point, if you look back at the internet, when the internet first started, all of the information in the world were basically on paper, right? We had everything documented on paper, but at some point that information had to be uploaded onto the internet in order for us to be able to use the World Wide Web and see the same documents, books, everything that we have in history. And so with the technology that underlies all crypto, which is the blockchain, and the blockchain is basically a ledger system that connects and locks information. So the blockchain is phenomenal because it can be viewed by anybody if it's a public blockchain, but nobody can change it. So it becomes a recording ledger system that is safe and protected for information. So the blockchain, basically Chainlink, is basically an oracle that's going to allow all of the information in the world to be transferred over from real world to the blockchain. And that can be anything from a radio show that maybe let's doing sports and they need numbers of scores in real time. The Chainlink is going to be the way that information is going to be transferred over from real world to the blockchain so that it can be viewed and used by that entity real time. So it's a phenomenal, has a large use case, and that's one of my favorites as well. So I could keep going, but I don't want to take too much time.
You got one more though, the one that you told me about. You always tell me about since the beginning.
XRP,
baby.
XRP. All right. Yeah, XRP is the redhead stepchild in the crypto space. I'll say that. And if anybody's on here and they're listening, you probably know that you're probably trying to figure out a way how to throw stones through the radio or the screen. But XRP is the one that is probably one of the most love. It has the most love, hate, I guess you could say. But for the people that understands the purpose of it, in the beginning, XRP was hated in the crypto space because the crypto space was designed to be a decentralized space. Okay. And when we say decentralized, everything else that we use in the world is controlled from a central location, government or corporation. There's a controlling entity that controls it, and it's a centralized entity that gives authority and ability to everybody else. Well, the world of decentralized finance, decentralized business is what crypto was really designed around. And so that was about freedom and nobody can control us. Well, XRP, which the owning company is Ripple. That was the original name of the crypto when we first bought it, was Ripple. They changed it to XRP. But Ripple worked with the banks. Their goal was to be an entity that allow currencies and money to be distributed across borders. It was a cross-border payment system that was going to allow the old system of SWIFT, which if you've ever tried to move money from country to country, it can take days sometimes to do that. And this was going to allow the same entities that will cost you maybe tens or hundreds of dollars to now cost pennies, and it could move in 8 seconds.
Absolutely.
So it's a great one. So one of my favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I just wanted to throw that in there.
So
I want to shift gears for a minute because we were talking about decentralization. That made me think about something else. So I want to talk about, I guess, censorship to a degree.
Okay.
So last week I saw an article where I want to say it was in the House of Representatives. There are a couple of Democratic congressmen that were actually introducing legislature to the House of Representatives to shut down OAN, I want to say.
Yes.
And when we watch Newsmax, Fox News, things like that, we've also seen just since, the final days of the Trump presidency, people being taken off of social media platforms, their accounts being closed because of the things that they were saying that didn't line up with what mainstream media was putting out there. And so you and I have some conversations about that. Give me your thoughts for a minute, just when in hearing that there's actually legislation in our Congress to start to close down news outlets that are speaking a different narrative. Like, just tell me where that takes you to.
Not a good place. I can tell you that. And the reason being is, regardless, to me, everyone should be afraid and concerned about this, regardless of if you want to call it what side of the aisle you're on politically. We as Americans should be very concerned about this. We're at a point where our Second Amendment rights, our First Amendment rights, excuse me, are being infringed upon, our freedom of speech. And if you go back to the purpose of the media, initially, the journalists, their job was to report the news, whatever the
Yes.
news was. It wasn't from a biased position. It didn't matter what your personal beliefs were. Your job was to report the news, information to the people so people could make informed choices. And now that's being questioned. So that was very shocking to me. I mean, just watching it happen, like where our lawmakers are trying to put laws in place that can quiet the voices of individuals or entities that they don't agree with. That's a big problem. We should be very concerned about. So I have great concerns about, our future, if that becomes a thing, if you would, the censorship, and it's looking like it's heading in that direction. If you don't if they don't agree with you, certain voices, then we're going to quiet you down. We're going to remove your ability to speak and give your views, and which limits the choices of the people.
Yeah, and you said that the purpose of journalists is now being questioned, or journalism is now being questioned. I mean, in my mind, it's not being questioned; it's being outright attacked. I
Yes.
mean, you have people that have their views that are outright attacking other people for having a different mindset, a different point of view, and that was never what it was intended to be. This. I've spent a decade working in a news company, in a news organization. And that was important to me because I remember hearing one time before that the media journalism was essentially the fourth estate of our government, right? It
Yes.
was the piece that held the other three components accountable, right?
Right.
Because in order for me as a citizen to be able to make informed decision, I have to get that from somewhere. And that was the job of the media, the job of journalism. And to see that now to where it looks like mainstream media, mainstream news outlets are not just giving us unfiltered information for us to make our own decisions. They're now telling us this decision that we should make. And anybody that's opposed to that is on the wrong side of the aisle, right? And
Right.
if you're on that side, you need to be silenced. There's something wrong with you. Like I hate that idea that if my opinion is different than yours, there's something wrong with me. I should be taken out and shot and whatever the case is. But that seems to be the state of where we are. And I don't know how we change that, how we get back to the true integrity of what the Constitution set up for us as citizens. I mean, what do you think is going to be required going forward to be in a place, a country to where people are free to have their own opinions, their own thoughts, and live their own lives as they see fit? I keep wondering what's going to be the answer to that. How are we going to, for anybody that's concerned as a citizen of this country and wants to make things better, wants to get back to the original ideology of the Constitution, what do you do? What do you say to that?
Well, like you mentioned, it's under attack, and it comes to a point. And again, this was systematically done, and we as Americans have been dumbed down intentionally, because everything comes back to the education. And I think sometimes if people knew better, they would do better. But a lot of people don't know any better because, again, what was the whole goal? And I don't want to go off into that direction too much, but it's the facts, it's the truth. Around the same time that the central banks took over our financial system was the same time that the bankers, one of them in particular, bought out the education system. And that was a systematic 100-year process of changing the education and the information so people would not even understand their rights. They wouldn't even know. It wouldn't even be important. Where we have today, people are ashamed and embarrassed of being in a capitalistic country. They think capitalism is bad. They think freedoms of speech is bad. They think the Constitution is an old document that needs to be changed and done away with. So this is a problem. So how do you fix it? That's a good question, because you have miseducation, and so wrong is right and right is wrong today. So you got half the country, or questionably half. depending upon who you ask, that that are on one side or the other. But it's education. It really comes down to that. The only other option outside of re-educating people and being able to do that effectively, because it's hard to beat the media system because it's owned and it's controlled. And that's where most people are getting their information, through the television. The television.
Yeah.
So, other than that, man, the only way for that to change is, and you got to be careful what you say today, because you can be accused of inciting violence or all of that stuff. But we know there was a point in time, you know this, you're a history guy, when the people had a problem with their representation. Right.
Right.
Which I feel that's where we're at right now. We have a problem with representation. And at that time, it was the Tea Party. And there was a revolution that took place at that point, where the people had to keep the government intact, because the moment the government controls the people, you've got tyranny. And in order for them to maintain their representation or their freedoms, if you would, there had to be a revolution. Now, again, I don't mean that people have to go kill somebody, do anything. That's not what we're talking about. But the people have to make a stand and keep the government in check. And that's going to be a unified, action, where the people have just said, hey, we've had enough.
Yeah.
You're not going to do that. So
you're right. And that was one of my big issues with January the 6th and the way that story was told. Because at the end of the day, as citizens in a democracy, our government has authority over us with or by our consent. Cool. Right? I consent for you to make laws and policies that will govern how I live my life, because I send you there to do that. And so I give you my consent to be able to have this authority over how I live my life. But at the point I no longer give you my consent, as a free human being, I have the right to make a stand and say, I no longer want you to represent me. Like, as Trump would say, you're fired, right? But at the end of the day, you still have the ability to stand up and say, I don't like this. I think this is wrong. And so on January 6th, you had almost 250,000 people that showed up at our seat of government to say, we think something's wrong. We want to have this investigated. We want to have it looked at. And ultimately, what occurred was some disorder. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. There was disorder. But when I heard it as Trump supporters stormed the Capitol building today, and that was a key word that, and you've told me this before, when you watch the news, you'll hear almost the same thing across every different channel or platform you're looking at. And I kept hearing this word storm. I kept hearing this word riot. I kept hearing insurgents, all of these different terms that were being played with that. And in my mind, I kept thinking, okay, there were 250,000 people outside of that Capitol building. For the amount of people they had inside trying to protect that, if that mob, if that group of rioters wanted to take the Capitol, there was nothing anybody could have done to stop that with that many people. Yep. So I say that to say that, contrary to popular opinion, there was only a small amount of people that entered the Capitol building in comparison to the total amount of people that were there. But again, you watch this narrative that's being given, and people that stood up to make their voices heard about how they felt their country should be governed, things that they felt were not right in the current process of government, were then deemed to be evildoers, plain and simple, and that was the narrative that was given, instead of allowing people to participate in their government, which is what we're supposed to have here. So I guess for me, that's just that thing of, what do you do when the people show up and take their responsibility to speak up and participate in government? If it doesn't fit the narrative, then you're deemed to be a rioter. You know what I mean? Exactly. So there's just got to be a way we can figure that out. And I agree with you about education, which is the ultimate reason why I began this podcast, this platform, was to be able to talk about things, to have people think about stuff in a different way. You don't have to agree with me, but I always hope that I can say something or provide some information that'll make you weigh both sides of any issue on your own. And if I present a piece of information to you And even if I attach my own opinion to it, and you look at the issue and decide, nah, I don't like your way, I still like it this way, fine, so be it, right? I'm not trying to convert anybody, but I'm always trying to make people think a different way, because I think there's so much information out there that most people, particularly here in this country, are missing out on. And so we're being led to we're being treated like sheep, you know. So I'm not going to go down that whole path, because you know how I feel about masks and viruses and stuff like that, and people just following along and nobody's asking questions about any of these things, you know.
Yeah.
So except down in Florida, I heard they got a governor down there that'll cuss people out.
Yeah.
But even the president, I don't know how true that is, but I did read that the governor of Texas told the president, President Biden, to go fuck yourself. And
that was, man, listen.
But hey, man, sometimes if you just want to be heard, you want to be heard. But you know, again, it comes back to the education piece of it, the information. And so this was something I had for you. I actually saved it for our conversation today, because the other day I was reading. No, I was on TikTok. And I saw this piece of information, or this little video, and the guy was talking about Black Lives Matter. Now, you know how I feel about that. We're not going down that road either. But it was something that was new for me, because I had never understood it. And so I went on, per the video, I went to the Black Lives Matter website. I don't know if you've ever done this before. When you go to the Black Lives Matter website, there is an About Us tab. You click on the About Us tab, and there are 3 selections. And one of the 3 selections is called Her Story. Okay. I'm going to read a little bit of this to you. So her story starts with, in 2013, 3 radical Black organizers, Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi, created a Black-centered political will and movement building project called Black Lives Matter. It was in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murderer, George Zimmerman. Okay, we'll scroll down a little bit, and I want to read this sentence to you, and I'm going to want to hear what you got to say about this. So two paragraphs down, it says, as organizers who work with everyday people, BLM members see and understand significant gaps in movement spaces and leadership. Black liberation movements in this country have created room, space, and leadership mostly for Black, heterosexual, cisgender men, leaving women, queer, and transgender people and others either out of the movement or in the background to make the work forward with little or no recognition. So apparently this is about recognition. As a network, we have always recognized the need to center the leadership of women and queer and trans people, to maximize our movement muscle, and to be intentional about not replicating harmful practices that excluded so many in past movements for liberation. We made a commitment to placing those at the margins closer to the center. And I've been a Black man for 48, almost 49 years now. I have paid close attention to all Black issues and Black movements in my lifetime that I was aware of. And some I agreed with and some I have not. Black Lives Matter, and I want to stipulate the difference between the organization and the movement, okay? Black Lives Matter as an organization, I don't necessarily agree with, but I never really understood why until about 3 days ago. Now, when I see hordes of people rushing out to take to the streets for issues under this banner, BLM, I have now discovered, and this is on their website, this is nothing that I'm making up. Anybody's free to go to blacklivesmatter.com, go to the About Us section, look at her story, and read exactly what I just read to you, okay? Public information. But this movement was created because trans, queer, and women felt like they were not getting enough recognition in the Black movements in this country. So I want to hear your take on this, because I know for me, if there was a reason to, again, not identify, and again, I don't knock anything anybody does. It's just either it's going to be something that I support or that I don't, right?
Correct.
And so if ever there was a reason not to identify with Black Lives Matter specifically as an organization, if this was your reason for starting this, count me out. Count me out. But I don't know. Had you ever read this before? Were you aware of this information?
I was aware of most of the information, but I had not read it. But I had understood that's what was behind it. It was packaged within the Black Lives Matter movement, but the agenda behind it looked very different than the package, quote unquote, if you would. Very, very much like that pork stimulus bill they're trying to push through, with only 9% of it being allocated towards actually what's going on in the economy.
Right.
And the rest of it is agenda behind it, right? And no different than that. You know, she got a lot of agendas working. So yeah, 100%. Black Lives Movement, and it's almost, you know, I'm a person that tries to do my due diligence, if you would, so they can be somewhat educated and informed, and not have the wool pulled over your eyes. Because I've come to understand that there's always somebody vying for your mind, right? Vying for your resources, vying for your time, and everybody's got something to sell. So it's important for us as people to do your own due diligence, right? To find out before you commit and go running off and just doing something to educate yourself. That's why I'm big on education.
Absolutely.
And so Black Lives Matter movement does not represent the Black people as we have been told, so to speak. And I think that's the biggest problem, because if you would want to look for, okay, Black Lives Matter movement, you say, okay, what would be a proper representation of that? It would have been Dr. Martin Luther King. And what happened at that time? That would have been Black Lives Matter, right? Real representation, like, and it wasn't other lives don't matter. It was Black Lives Matter. There was no other agenda. We just need a voice. We want equal rights. That was pretty much it, because at that time, there was a problem in that area. And so they did it right. And there was nothing else stuffed inside of that. It was, at its essence, what was said is what it was. And we're not getting that right now. So you could be Black, but you don't agree with the things that's packaged inside of that.
Right.
And we are those individuals. We are Black men. And we all are, we're about, you know, Blacks having the same rights. We don't want anything extra. The challenge I have with, without going too far that way, is that if you have the same rights, which I feel we all do, you shouldn't be receiving anything extra.
Right.
You know, and so yeah, I'm not in agreement with it at all. I don't stand for it, because it's not a representation of us as a people, because they only come out when there's a white cop that kills a Black person.
Trouble.
Yeah, when
there's trouble.
And there's only trouble when there's a white officer or a white person that has done something to a Black person, never a Black person that has done something to a Black person. So Black Lives Matter under certain conditions.
Right.
And that's one of my challenges as well.
Yeah, because I think when you look at that, you have to ask, Black Lives Matter to who? Like, do they matter to us as Black people? You know what I mean? Yes. That's the other conversation. You're right. We won't go there. But I do want to take the opportunity to talk about it, because you mentioned that probably the purest form of what an organization like this should represent was during the era of Martin Luther King and the civil rights in the 60s. And, you know, I've long said, and so that's why I want to state this publicly. I've long said that I feel like the biggest problem in the Black community today is the void of true leadership, right? Because every time I see a person of color get shot, and then we have these rallies and these marches, and then the actual riots, right? I mean, people literally burning up property and tearing up police cars and confronting the police. You have these things, and there's no agenda. There's no mission. So basically, we're just taken to the streets to say that we're pissed off, right? Yeah, but first of all, what are you pissed off about? And two, what do you want done about it? Who's the person that stands up and says, okay, this is what we want to see happen? Right. Because every time I watch TV, all I hear is people saying, we just want to be heard. We want a place at the table. You know, we want people to be considerate of us. Okay, you want to be heard? The world is listening, right? George Floyd, everybody in the entire world was listening to anything and everything Black people had to say. Who stood up and said, this is what we want? You know, what you want to be heard, but what is it that you want to say? And so I feel like Martin Luther King did such a tremendous job, a tremendous act for the Black community, in that he was able to come to the table and say, these are the things that we want. We want our voting rights. We want equality in schools. You know, any of the laws that were non-beneficial to Black people in this country, we want those things removed. We want equal rights. And here's the list of them. Okay. And until we get these things, you're going to see hundreds of thousands of Black people out in the streets, right? Every time, as long as we have to continue to ask for this, we're going to ask for these things. When we get these things, then we will pull back on these public demonstrations, okay? Today, we see the same types of public demonstrations, probably greater and more violent, if you will, more destructive. But there's nobody saying this is what we want from that, right? There's nobody saying that we want to see X, Y, and Z happen. So, for instance, and I've shared this with you, if it were me, when we were talking about the George Floyd murder, okay, what is it that we want to see? We seen Black men die, or Black people die at the hands of white police officers in this country, right? That was the common thing. But what is it that you're asking the people in position to do something about that? What is it that you're asking them for? So for me, I've seen information officer. There's a reason why the police officer doesn't immediately go to jail. They're generally sent home on administrative leave. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay. And part of that reason, and I don't understand it, I want to find someone who can explain it to me, is something that is embedded in the agreement, the contract with the unions. So there's something in there that states that if a police officer draws his weapon or kills a civilian, that they cannot be cannot be arrested at that time. Okay. I feel like that should be removed, because the arrest is the deterrent. You and I will not go out and rob a bank, rob a store, a convenience store, anything like that, because we know that if we get caught, we're going to jail that day immediately, right? If we were to harm another individual, kill another individual, we're going to jail on site. That is generally the deterrent for most people to not commit certain types of crimes. Police officers, while I give them all of the respect in the world because they protect our society, they don't have that deterrent that if I pull this trigger, I'm going to jail today like anybody else. If I pull this trigger and this person dies, I'm going home to have dinner with my family tonight. We'll work out the rest later. And I feel like that is something that needs to be addressed. If I'm the person sitting at the table on behalf of Black people, this is what I'm asking for, right? I'm asking for a much more aggressive process of psychological evaluations for police officers, right? I was in the military, and when I went in the military, just for a simple job to get a basic secret clearance, I had the FBI come to my little hometown. They interviewed my mom. They interviewed my guidance counselor, some of my high school buddies. They wanted to know, had I ever been involved with anybody from Russia or from a communist country? They want to know my background to see that mentally, would I ever do anything to harm the United States of America, right? The very country that I'm going in to protect, they want to know my psychological makeup to see if I would ever do anything to turn on that and actually cause harm to the country, right?
Right.
That's at a much higher level than the police officers that serve our communities. And so why don't they have that same type of psychological background? I would want to know, has this person ever exhibited any racial tendencies? Have they ever been known to associate with the Klan or anybody else that might show that there's something there? Because I have to believe that on the day that police officer kept his knee in George Floyd's neck, for almost 9 minutes, that something in his mind snapped and there's something that he didn't like about this person. Now, on the surface, we say he didn't like his color. Okay, so let's just go with that narrative. If that police officer didn't like black people, somewhere along the line in his life, that behavioral pattern had been viewed by somebody else, right? It had presented itself. And so I say all of that, I digress a little bit, but the idea is that these are the people that are designed to protect and serve our communities. We should have a much more aggressive and intentional process of psychologically evaluating these people that are protecting our kids, that are protecting our elderly, that are protecting our streets. So again, if I'm sitting at the table representing black people while they out marching in the street, then this is what I'm bringing to the table to ask for. You know what I mean? So my point is, and I've drawn that out, but my point is, we have a void of leadership in our community to where we're not able to see anyone step to the forefront and give direction to tell the masses, don't march on this day because ain't nobody paying attention. We're going to march next Thursday when Congress is in session or something like that. However it works, what is going to be the strategy? What is going to be the directive? And more importantly, what is going to be the objective of us taking this action? What do we hope to get from that? And we don't have that anywhere in our community, which is why I feel like we have so many issues, so many unresolved issues. We keep seeing these same things happen over and over again because we're not addressing the root causes because there's nobody to be able to ask for the things that will change those.
Absolutely.
That was a long-winded tirade.
No, but
jump in.
No, but that was good because you put it out there. I mean, that's really what it is. We have no leadership, and see, there's different types of leaders, right? Mm-hmm. Most people are familiar with positional leaders, right? Which are people that, because of their position, military, he's your boss at your job, you have to follow them. You have to listen to them, or there's going to be repercussions if you do not, i.e. getting fired, whatever case may be. But then you have leaders that lead because of who they are and what they represent, right? And I'm going to go back to Martin Luther King, right? People follow him, even Malcolm X. People follow these people for a reason. And we don't have that today, right? Because number one, most people, again, lack education. So the people who's leading the movement today, anybody that's got money, right? Because money has been deemed the thing that, you should be seeking for. So if this person has money, they could be a basketball player, an actor, actress, athlete of some sort. If they say something, then we're going to follow whatever they say. We're going to go with that narrative. But we don't have that real leader that they don't have to have all those things. It's because of who they are and what they represent and what they stand for. We have somebody that's willing to put their head above the crowd, take the tomatoes for what is right. We don't have that. We don't have anybody in our generation that's willing to do that. And that's what we're missing. So because that person is missing, the leaders are now just whoever has an opinion. And so the people are scattered. Does that make sense? There's no unity. And that's the biggest problem. The goal of any deceptive enemy, if you can cause confusion, one of the greatest ways to, if you have an enemy and you're in battle, if you want to infiltrate the enemy, is to break down their communication, because if they can't communicate effectively, get everybody on the same page, then how can they operate as one, right?
Sure.
And so what's happened now is we got a breach in the communication. And so someone else is coming in, they've infiltrated the movement, if you would. And the people are scattered because there's different voices in their ears. And then there's an agenda behind it. And so because of that, the people aren't on one page. So we've got division, right? And you have no one standing in the center that the people can look to that's representing the whole, like, hey, we as a people need to move forward because the agendas are mixed. And that's political at this point. It's politicized. Everything is politicized right now, and that's caused a great division. So, we need a unification of the people, because us as a people, we've been divided for so long on many levels. And you see with other groups of people, it's a kind of a subtle unity. You and I have seen it. And again, us as a people, we've got to get away from the politics. That's the problem. We're infused in. Let's get away from the politics. If us as a people, if we're going to move forward, we've got to get on the same page. We've got to, like you said, what are we trying to accomplish? What is it that you want? What do you want to accomplish? Versus just this move of activity, Pavlov's dogs. Okay. You
Yes.
ring the bell, they salivate, right?
Right.
So all we have to do is run this article, show some white guy doing something to some black person, and we just run that over and over, over and over all
Absolutely.
throughout the day. And we know the reaction of this group of people, like mindless creatures. They're just going to react. No
Yep.
thinking. Take to the streets, destroy your own stuff, burn down your own communities,
Absolutely.
go to jail for all that purpose.
Yeah.
And nothing becomes of it. And then everybody calms down and go back inside the house, rinse and repeat. And there's no change. So how do we evoke change?
And nobody asked any questions.
Nobody asked questions.
Nobody put any thought into the
Right.
process. Like that's been one of my biggest issues as we've gone through the pandemic is as things are passed down, nobody's even put any thought behind any of it or asking any questions. You know what I mean? And so, the same thing, like you said, with the Black community, there aren't questions being asked. Like I saw something the other day, and this guy put this information out there, and I haven't researched this to verify it, but it just made me think, right? And he said that during the days of slavery, there were approximately 300,000 slave owners in this country, 300,000 slave owners. His question was, how many of them do you think were Republicans, were Republican slave owners? And so he went through his little spiel. At the end of the day, his number was 8.
Wow.
8, not 8,000, not 80,000, not 800, 8. 8 out of 300,000. The other 299,092 people were Democrats. I only bring that up because I often wonder why the Black community is so aligned with the Democratic Party in the political spectrum, right? And we're not going to get into that today, but it's just to the point of they ring the bell, we come running, right? There's no thought to it. There's no questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, those are the things, but, I just wanted to have the conversation with you because I know you and we talk about this all the time. We think about it. And I think somewhere along the line, we have to get more engaged as individuals to say, if nothing else, how can we put more information out there to help educate our people, right?
Absolutely.
To educate our community, to help them make better decisions, to help them maybe change the way that they think, or not even change it, but just explore why they think that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll say this in that, and this is going back to the very first thing we started talking about, because we cover some ground, but it's education. I can't stop going back to that because education is the foundation of everything. I have mentors in my life. I do mentor, and it comes back down to what are you putting in your head. And so the thing I would say to people are, well, how do we fix it? How do we change? Well, it's one person at a time, right? And that's a personal responsibility for us as parents. You need to start with your education so that you can pass that education down to your children. So you have to sometimes unlearn things that you've already, your whole life, you've thought it to be truth until you educate yourself. You realize, like, oh my gosh, this is not the truth. So re-educating yourself. And because if you don't have economic freedom, you'll never have true freedom. You cannot have real freedom if you don't have economic freedom. And that's just the foundation. So if you're impoverished and everyone around you is impoverished, you're easily led to slaughter because somebody else is controlling the flow. And it's until you get a grasp on your finances. And that's where you as individuals are taking your time and cutting off the television and the television and the sports and taking some time to educate yourself and get truth into your mind so that you can really see how the world really works. And once you look at how the world really works, you can start the process of fixing your future, because that's where crypto comes in. It's to me, we're at the greatest turning point in the history of mankind. There's never been a point in time where the average person, right? The average person with an average income can change his entire financial future with a small amount of money, with some intention and some focus and being intentional. Does it take discipline? Yes. 100% discipline, being intentional. You have to change your mindset from, and I'll give you a perfect example, from investing in liabilities versus assets. Okay. And a quick note on that: assets are things that make you money. Liabilities are things that take money out of your pocket. I'll give you a perfect example, and I'll be brief. I had a conversation with someone today. I won't name names, but I asked this person, and they are a person of color, and that's irrelevant because people of all colors do the same thing. It's one mindset. I
Right.
said they mentioned that they were going to be getting a tax return of 4,500 bucks. And
Okay.
I asked this intention. I'm like, what are you planning on doing with that? Do you know what the answer was? Um, I'm going to get a new radio system in my car, some new speakers. I'm going to potentially get some tires so I can put my rims back on my car. And I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
I,
And
I,
what's bad about, I'm sorry to cut you off, but what's bad about that is they've been waiting all year since they got their last tax return to be able to do that to their car, and that's what that represents to them.
and that's where his money's going. And like you and I know, because we you know made it our business to as businessmen to educate ourselves continually, not just one time, but to continue to educate ourselves and to learn and to try to get around people that know more than we know, so that we can learn and continue to grow forward, not just for ourselves but for our families in the future. What the resources that you have is your seed. That's your ability to create more with it, or
Yes.
or put it into something that is going to give you less of a return. And I think of that same $4,500, if he did something with that and put that into some form of an investment that could multiply for him and it could give him a
Absolutely.
return. And just due to the lack of education or focuses of time on proper education, that's going to leave his hands, like the Bible talks about, a fool and their money will soon depart.
Yes.
And that's what we see more of in our communities than anything, is the departure of the wealth. And the wealth is moving from the hands of the Black community into other groups of people that already have wealth. And we have to get that under control if we're going to
We have
change
to
it.
get that education.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
So I'm gonna put you on the spot because as you talk about that, I personally know you are highly educated. You research everything. Like if you want to know about something, ask George. Give him a day or two because he's gonna research it. So with your research, there's some things that we don't necessarily see eye to eye on, or I have not gotten to that because I haven't done that research. So I'm gonna put you on the spot for a minute. I want you to talk to me about why you feel like the earth is not round. Because, and the reason why I bring that up is because I remember the very first time you told me that, I was like, this dude is on some other stuff, man. I'm not going to be able to get down with this cat like that. I love him, but I'm not going to be able to roll with him on that. And as time has continued to pass, and I see more and more stuff, read more and more of my own research, I'm actually at that place to where I want, maybe he got onto something there. You know what I mean? I want you to tell me or tell our listeners uh, what your thoughts are on that, because I think it's a very interesting perspective, and most people may never hear stuff like that. You know,
Well, you asked for it, so
I did,
I'm
I
here to
did.
deliver. So I'll start with this, right? I always maintain my beliefs, and I don't try to force my beliefs on others, but I do have
Sure.
my own reviews. And again, I believe in doing your own homework and not letting anybody control your mind, as I mentioned multiple times. So foundation and background on that, since I was in elementary school, I've been a heavy science guy. So just big into science, always have been. And the study of the planetary system, space, has just been a high level of interest. It was just the thing I love the most. But I'm also a Christian, and I believe in the Bible. And in my reading of the scripture, namely Genesis chapter 1, um, after getting my mind open to this potential that, okay, the earth may not look the way we've been taught it to look, I decided to look further in the scripture, because to me, I believe the foundation of my beliefs should go back there, because I believe God created the earth, so he should know how it's set up. And in my studying of the scripture, it was in black and white that I don't believe, based upon what I read, that the earth could possibly be set up the way that it's been said. One of the first things I found out is that God said in the Bible that the earth cannot move. It is set upon foundations multiple times in the Bible. So that's not hard. The earth is supposedly spinning through space, right? But it's not, according to God's word. So either you believe it or you don't, in my personal system, right? And he said that it can't move. And also in Genesis 1, it speaks that when he created the earth, he separated the waters from the waters, and there was um, a firmament put in between that. And if you look in the firmament, I won't go into that right now, you can see what firmament means. And there was waters above the firmament and below, which was on the earth. And he set the sun, the stars, and the moon inside of the firmament. And So that means there's something up there, right, above us. And the other thing, being a science guy, is that, you know, you look at the oceans and the water, it's flat. It's always flat. And it's called sea level, right? I'm a contractor. I have a construction company, and I use a level all the time. That's the way we keep things flat and level, right? And it's called sea level. We could do the science on this all day long, but just some basic things. I mean, if you can figure out, and I'll leave this with every listener, if you can figure out how to get still water, water that's sitting still water, not flowing water, but still water, to curve. Science, if you're a science person or not, figure out how to get water to not be level if it's still. You do your own research. If you can figure that out, I'll be willing to have a conversation to change my views. I haven't figured it out yet, and I've done a lot of research on it. So to me, it's impossible to get water to curve around the globe and to be stuck to the bottom of a ball. If that was the case, I don't think anything else could work. So I'll leave that there. I'm not going to go further down that road. But my personal belief is believe the Bible, read Genesis 1, and read it slowly. And if you're a Bible reader, if you're not, you know, do the science. But the astronauts have said themselves, if you understand space, that there's a Van Allen belt around the Earth. That's a energy field around the Earth. This is basic science and known that we've not been through the Van Allen belt. And that was from NASA. So we've not been through the Van Allen belt. That means we've never been to the moon, because the moon is on the other side of that. So by their own admission, there's some things that are not true and accurate. So
yeah.
anyway.
That came to mind because you know, I saw a video probably a couple of weeks ago, and it got me to thinking about this thing again. And so it was talking about how airplanes. So, you know, when I was younger, I had a private pilot's license. And so I remember the instruments keep you at sea level. There's something. And so the guy was talking about in the primitive form of airplanes, how is it possible that a pilot who is trying to stay flat with the horizon, that plane or that instrument will adjust for Earth that is continuously curving? Like that instrument can't accommodate that. It can't account for a continuous curve. And so now, you know, again, because I remember having to study the books to get my license, I was like, I don't know. Yeah. Right. Like that makes a little sense to me, you know?
Yeah.
And then I saw another documentary about people having gone to the South Pole, as it's called, or Antarctica.
Yeah.
Antarctica, and what they found when they got there, like basically it's a wall of ice, you can't get out. Right. So anyway, it just that those things got me to thinking, and so like I said, when you first mentioned this to me, I was just totally opposite side. Okay, look, we just gonna have to agree to disagree on that. You know, I got a globe at home. You know, my whole life they just showed us these globes, these round things. The Earth is round, dude. I think you're a little far fetched on that one. But again, as you talked about, it's the education. It's about taking the time to find information for yourself and then discern it for yourself. Does this make sense to me? If it doesn't, then dismiss it.
Right.
But like I said, as a person who at a younger age went through the process of getting a license to fly an airplane, there was certain information that they gave us and certain tools and instruments that they taught us to use. And I'm like, when that was presented to me, that makes sense to me. How am I keeping a flat horizon on something that is continuously curving?
You can't,
right?
you can't do it. No, there's no factor in for curvature in instrumentation in any type of device. Even for your military guys that maybe Navy, and you have laser guided missile systems.
Mm-hmm.
And if you guys, any of you people that are listening or individuals may know somebody in that field or you have worked in it, it's impossible to have a laser guided missile system on a curve, because lasers can only go straight. Eventually that missile would just fly off into the sky because it wouldn't factor in the curve. Lasers can't curve. So it would have to be level, a level space for that laser, or it would either run into something, or it has to be level. Everything makes sense when you pull away from your preconceived notions and you use your brain. That's the whole thing. They don't want you to use your brain. Everything is to program your mind. That's why it's called television and radio programming. They're programming your brain. So you have to pull away and you have to take your computer under your control and you put the input in it and use your brain to think. God gave us a brain to use. So That's been my way of thinking. So,
well, I love these conversations with you, Deacon.
me as well.
No, man, I got a list of things that I could go through with you, but we're not going to take up all the time of the day trying to cover all of that. And also, I know you're a busy man. I will say that I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule, because I personally know how hard it is to lock you down for more than 15 minutes, much less a couple of hours. And I'm looking forward to us. We've been doing some excursions lately. We've been taking some adventures. Our greatest one to date has been when we went to Mexico, man. I just
absolutely.
I just love that. And so I know we've been talking over the last couple of months about setting up another trip to go to Mexico. I recently got back from Miami, and that was great, but I think it's even better in Mexico. And so, because now I know you sent me something the other day that talked about being able to go over the border not on an airplane. Is that still the way that it works that you know of?
Yeah, absolutely. From my understanding, that's still an effective way of moving. So, some people, depending upon your belief system, some people are all for the vaccinations and the tests, some are not. I'm not. I don't believe the PCR tests or otherwise are accurate. In my personal belief, and the vaccinations is definitely a no-go. In my personal belief, again, I know you didn't ask that question, but
I'm fine. I'm glad you put it out there.
My personal belief, this is just something for every individual to just think about for yourselves. I mean, just pull away from the news. Just realize that somebody's controlling that entity that wants you to think a certain way. That's all I'm talking about. It's not political, one party or the other. It's just for you personally. Pull away from that for a second and just realize that somebody owns that. Somebody's trying to get information out to the people, and the people behind it can very well have an agenda. So you need to pull away from that, and now let's think for ourselves. Cancer's been around for 100 years, longer, but recorded wise, at high levels. There's been no cure. Why? The last cure from a vaccination was polio. That's been ages. Probably very few people on here was alive at that time. And also the fact that you have something like HIV, according to them, HIV AIDS, no vaccination. So you're going to tell me there's going to be a virus that's going to, quote unquote, come out of nowhere last year, and in 3-4 months you've got a vaccination, and there's been no trial studies. It's put in under an emergency act so that the vaccination companies, the pharmaceutical companies, have no liabilities.
No liability.
From anything that happens to your body after that. And now they're going to try to force you to take it in order to travel. You have to pull away and look at that and say, okay, something may be wrong with this. The average, and by the way, I've been in the health and nutrition industry for 20 years at a very high level. And that's something that I do. I coach in that area as well. And one of the things you have to look at is pharmaceutically, the average vaccination to basically get to a point to where it's, okay, this is good. This is great. It's 20 years.
Right.
7 at the earliest. And we got a vaccination in 3 months. Not in my body. So I just recommend everybody to, before you just blindly take it because somebody says it's a good idea, they're telling you it's harmless. How do you know it's harmless? We just got it. You got years to know this. By that time, people are going to be looking like Quasimodo.
I was going to say, you haven't given enough time to see if any harm will come from it.
Absolutely.
You don't even know.
Yeah, so I just recommend everybody think for yourself. Just use your own brain and think for yourself. If it doesn't make sense to you, don't rush into any kind of decision. Do your due diligence. Don't blindly do it because everybody's doing it.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah, because again, we see so many different things on the news, and case in point, like we were just talking about Mexico. When you and I went to Mexico last year, and this was right before the pandemic. Matter of fact, remember we had the conversation. You called me. You said, "Hey, Pastor, look, this virus thing is spreading around. How you feel about still taking this flight to Mexico?" And I was like, well, when I look at the countries that it's supposedly in right now, Mexico ain't on the list. I think that's the safest place we could be.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So we got on the plane, man. And when it had amazing time. And one of the things we found when we got there was from the media, you would think that Mexico is a bad place and bad things can happen to you there and all the kind. And I understand there are some inherent dangers, but we were treated like royalty.
Yes.
We were treated far better than we're treated here in our own country.
No question.
Right?
We talked about that. We talked about that a lot. Yes.
Yes.
Like, man, we need to stay here because this is the best treatment we've ever had.
Hey, you know what I mean? But if we had listened to the media,
Yes.
If we had listened to what's portrayed through news outlets, then we would have determined this is not a safe place for us to go. It's a horrible place to be. Man, we were in Acapulco looking at blue water on the beaches. We went out to the what was that? The turtle race that night.
It was a turtle release where the turtles are released. They hatch on the beach and they're released into the ocean. And it was just this big event around that fire on the beach. It was food and great people. It was amazing.
Oh, great people,
amazing.
Man. We met people that changed our lives down there.
Absolutely.
And took them on a yacht. But that's
another talk for another time. It was an amazing experience to me. Life and Broderick, you're one to say that it's all about the experience.
Yes,
you've always lived by that, and that's been something that I've benefited from because we've talked about it. And you're always about creating great experiences. You realize, hey, we live one time, and you got to take advantage of the life that you have and create these experiences. And that was one of many that I'm sure we're going to do, but it was definitely a memorable one. And I can't wait to go back and
hey man, I'm already doing research so we can get a date and time to go wheels up, man.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, look, as always, I love our conversations, which is why I thought it was so imperative to make that a part of this particular format that I'm now a part of. And so I can't tell you how much I appreciate you just taking some time out of your day, because you got a lot of things going on. You got multiple businesses, and so it is hard to lock you down. So I appreciate you giving me the time to be able to come on and talk with me about some things and just kind of share our thoughts, man, because for me, that's what X Communications is all about. It's just being able to give people a different way to think about things that are outside of the norm, and I often feel like some of the ways I feel about things is what gets me kicked out of most places, which is why we named this X Communications. And I know if I was getting kicked out of somewhere, you would be the person right by my side to get kicked out with me. So
right there with you. Absolutely.
I appreciate you, man. We're going to definitely have to do this again because it's a lot more stuff I want you to talk about. But on the next go around. So I appreciate you, man. And we'll definitely get back together again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for letting me give me the opportunity to be on your show, and I congratulate you on your new show as well. And best of blessings, and I know more to come. So thanks a lot. Appreciate being on here. Been a pleasure.
All right, man. Take care.
All right. You too. Thanks.